Hi, this is my scariest encounters as an adult. As I talk about these encounters that happened in Kentucky, Luzerne, Michigan, and the Huron National Forest, and in Berry County, Michigan. The hikes I will show you bits and pieces of that never been seen before from Evart, Michigan, on 9/14/22 and the summer of that year. Evart, Michigan is in the northern lower peninsula and it is above Big Rapids. During the daytime I'm using a GoPro Hero 10, at night I'm using a Psionics Aurora Pro night vision camera. Okay, these incidents that I'm going to share with you, I've been keeping them myself for quite a while. They happened from 2017 through 2019 at different spots. Some took place a little bit earlier. I'll get to that now. What I'll do is I'll put links in the description below of the times we were at these different spots, so you can take a look at the spots and the times we were there. We weren't always in the same spot. We were moving around, and oftentimes we didn't have cameras on or trail cams working, just because we stayed in one spot for a night and then we moved to another spot. And that's when things really were weird. And one time was just one time when I was just at a meeting spot that I call it, that's close to my house, and it was fairly early on when I started meeting with the Sasquatch here, and what took place I haven't shared because they're kind of scary, and I don't want you to think this is going to happen to you, but the possibility is there that this might happen to you if you're out looking for Sasquatch alone or with maybe with another person, and you're separated from them somehow. If you keep on persisting at a certain level, going every night like I am and going to the same spots, they're going to wonder what you're up to, and they're going to come check you out one way or another. Like I said, I don't know if they're going to do this to you. Maybe this has something to do with all the encounters I had when I was a kid. But they came in real close, and they checked me out, and one time they actually took me, and I'm going to tell you about those times. People are generally only interested in my childhood encounters with, the pictures. I have drawings to show. A lot of my older videos, and I've been doing this for years now, and I've got over 400 videos on here. I've had hundreds of encounters, and over the years, far more than I ever did as a child, and many more places all over the country, from Michigan all the way down to Florida. Most of my encounters, of course, happen in Michigan, but I'd say the bulk of them, other than Michigan, were in Kentucky.
There you go. Come here, man.
And I'll tell you about those here in a second.
Just come over here. Stand a little ways in those weeds, would you?
Yeah.
For measurement. Yeah, that's good. That's good. I can't film myself.
Now, I was going to do a bunch of little cut-ups and clips and waste my time trying to sew together another video that takes me 60 hours that only 100 people see. I'm not going to do that. I'll just put the links in the description below to the older videos, so you can check those out, and there's a lot of them. I won't have them all on here, of course. I'll just have the relevant ones to these encounters in those specific areas, specifically around Luzerne, Michigan, Kentucky, around the Mammoth Cave area, and Berry County, close to my house.
Down by the Beaver Dam.
Now, the ones here in Berry County that are closest to my house, and the ones that I call Mike's Woods over in the Middleville State Game area, are the ones I quite often don't use, if at all, any cameras with, because I try to see how close I can get to them, and I use all my cameras and trail cams and whatnot on the other areas, because I've got plenty of other areas, and I mark down the times and the dates of these areas where I have encounters, and I go back to these areas at the same time every year. Last year I didn't have enough money to go back down to Kentucky again, but I hope to this year. Actually, I'll probably be going down there in a couple weeks. Now the ones for the area closest to my house, I kept most quiet about. The ones that got ruined by my neighbors, calling the DNR, and the black helicopters and the drones showed up with their thermals, and they ruined everything last year. I haven't seen them since, at least in this area, but for almost 8 years, every night during the summer, I mean every night, unless it was like 4th of July or something loud was going on with fireworks, and they're out there at this meeting spot, and I would leave them bananas and apples, and it was a short meeting where I'd do a couple calls back and forth, and I would leave them a bucket in a tree with the bananas, apples in it. And I didn't want to feel like I was making them have to, communicate or do tricks or anything like that to get their food. I would just kind of like greet them. Whatever call I was doing that night, each night it was a different sound. Sometimes it was just a pop or a whistle. But quite often I would make different noises to see if they'd, like a cat or a dog or a baby cry or something like that, or a duck, to, get them to do it back. And quite often they did. And, just like when I was a kid, they would do it way better and get carried away with it. It was something. I never used recorders on them. I very rarely had a camera on them, except for the early times when I went out there to test the camera. And I did capture them one time, a couple of the small juveniles out there. And this went on every night for, like I said, for like almost 8 years. And it was a huge freaking learning experience. But I would go out there barefoot in my shorts and just with a little light on my hat is all I would have. And that's kind of their rules. They liked it when it was dark and everything was to their advantage. They didn't like the lights in their eyes, so I kept the light pointed down, and then I would get out there and shut it off. And I couldn't see a whole lot, and there was even a time that I even stepped on one of the juveniles' feet and it screamed, and it was like about as tall as my shoulder, and it was like, right in my ear. I've already dumb and clumsy. I don't know if I talked about this one before or not, but and I'll show you some of the videos here, and I'll give you the links to all these, some of the captured ones that I have. Well, for the first couple of years I started doing research, we would mostly go over to the Manistee National Forest. Manistee is really nice, but there's a lot of hikers in that area and a lot of partying going on. We're getting a little bit of action over there as far as Sasquatch goes, hearing calls and, weird things in the night. But we decided to go check on Huron National Forest over on the east side of the state after a couple of years. And the best spots we found were probably over by Roscommon area, and we got up to Luzerne near Foley Swamp, and we found this spot. This is in 2017, and it was one hell of a spot. I mean, Huron National Forest doesn't have as much water, it seems, as Manistee does. There's water and hills everywhere in Manistee. And we found a good spot that had a big creek coming off the back of Foley Swamp. And things started the very first time we were there. That's when we got the thermal reading, and I'll put a link into that in the description. And I'll put the video to where we're going to look for another spot. At one point we go to a different spot, and this spot is the one that something really, really weird happened that I'm going to tell you about, and I'll put a link to that in there also. Now this spot you'll see in the video, we're following this worn out 2-track further and further into the woods in the Huron National Forest. We follow it until it runs out. It just kind of goes to this little dead end, and there's kind of not even enough room to turn around, but it looks like somebody had made a camp there. And it was kind of on a little plateau on a small hill, and it went down to a valley that had a swamp on one side of it. Before the swamp, it had a little grass plain, a little field before the swamp, and then there's a small line of brush and trees as it went in the swamp. And on the video you can see us go down there. And what you can't hear very well on the video is the the knocking that we heard on the trees. When we got to that spot that was really close to the swamp, and we went across that little grass plain right there, and we got up to the tree line, and it turned into a swamp to where we couldn't go anymore. It was too mucky, and we would have sunk into probably up to our knees. And we stopped at that point, and that's when we heard the knocking. There was a tree knock at there was like a ridge that went around the swamp, and there was large hardwood trees around the swamp on this ridge, up on this ridge, and the ridge is probably not more than 100 feet tall. It wasn't really big or nothing, but
look at all those sticks.
We heard the knocking closest to us by up in one of these hardwood trees, and then the next hardwood tree a little ways down was followed by another knock and another one and another one. Like they're all warning each other all around the swamp and on this ridge and these hardwood trees. They had scouts up there, so we knew that's where they were probably at. We were by no means, even if we could, we weren't going to enter. We're seeing a lot of Sasquatch. We're hearing a lot of tree knocks, and we knew there was quite a few of them back there. But we decided that little turnaround area where the 2-track ended would be a good place to spend the night once. And we did that. We set it up. And I didn't put any trail cans up like I did at the other spot we're at over by the creek. And there was a creek by this spot, but it was much further back on the other side of the swamp. Once we set this up, I backed the truck up to the spot, and there was just enough area just to put the 2 tents. And the tents were literally right up against the brush, and it was like a little circle around it. And this was on, like I said, a plateau of a hill. And it went down to that valley in the swamp and the creek down there. And we decided to stay the night there, just one night, to see what would happen. And this is early on. I was kind of green, and I probably will never do this again. Especially being that close to them and especially having the brush almost touching the tent like that. We had barely enough room to even set up the tents, and the truck was facing the opposite way in case we wanted to get out of there really fast. Another thing, the guy that I was with, Dango, Brandon calls himself Dango, and he's in a lot of these videos, and especially the early ones. Well, he goes to sleep, and the tents are probably about 6 to 10 feet apart at the most in this little spot. And he doesn't wake up for nothing, and he snores really loud. That's why we usually have the tents far away from each other as possible. So I'm not going to listen to him snore because I'm a real light sleeper, and he's a real heavy sleeper. Most of the time, I can't even wake him up. I mean, there was a couple times I had something happen in camp. When we're camping, and I'm yelling, I'm going to have to go over and get out of my tent and go over and kick his tent or shake his foot or something just to get him to wake up. And this time, and later in Kentucky, that's kind of a problem. Here, I'll tell you what happened. Well, after a long day of hiking, and we even went much further back than this spot that we decided to camp at where the 2-track ran out. There was a horse trail that ran miles and miles further south from this spot that we were at, and we didn't even find an end to. It was getting late, so we went up and set up really quick. And like I said, we just put the 2 tents right in the back of the area right behind the truck. And around the tent, within inches, brush everywhere. And, it was a little flat area. And it went down a hill all the way around it. Dumb place to stay, but I didn't know any better, and I thought I'd give it a try and see what I could hear at night. And I didn't set anything up on purpose just to see how close they would get. But I know they would get a little way too close for comfort. Well, when we turned in finally at night, we went into each of our tents. I stayed awake for quite a while. After about 45 minutes or an hour or so, I heard Dango start snoring. So I knew he was asleep, but I kept on hearing something getting closer in the brush. And, like I said, the brush came right up to the tent. I still didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to it. I thought they would just get close and, maybe check things out. But pretty soon my tent was getting pressed on. or something hitting the tent.
Everything dead and gone.
And it took the shape of a hand, a giant hand on the top of my tent. And I was about to say something, to yell at the dango, and it just immediately came right down on me. The whole tent with the shape of this hand. Well, the next thing I knew, I wasn't awake anymore, and I was floating over my tent in an out-of-body experience, looking down at my tent with at least 3 Sasquatch squishing down my tent. This all happened within seconds, and I looked over while I was floating up, and I looked over to the other tent, and there was 3 of them by Dango's tent. I don't know how I could see this. I don't know how this happened, and I don't know another way to explain it. But I woke up in the morning. I had a huge red welt on my chest. It wasn't the shape of a hand anymore, but my chest hurt. And I remember that, what happened. And I thought it was part of a dream. I just kind of, I didn't think much of it. I just thought I made it up in my head. And I didn't even say anything to Dango other than, I think something squished my tent and look, my chest is red. I don't know if I imagined this or if I had a weird dream and I did this to myself. I just don't know. But I was pretty green at the time, and I didn't know this actually happened. And this was about to happen another time, but it was a couple of years later. Yeah, I know that all sounds weird, but this is why I didn't tell anybody, because it all sounds so weird. But dealing with several different tribes of Sasquatch, I didn't know this was going to happen again, but not exactly in the same way. No, they had collapsed my chest and made me pass out. And I had an out-of-body experience. I don't know if any of you have ever had this or played the pass-out game as a kid, to when you breathe really heavy and somebody presses your chest in until you pass out and everything goes all wonky. That's exactly what happened. It happened quickly. But I stayed asleep and I woke up the next day and remembered it. And no recall of anything in between whatsoever. And this other one's odd too. So here I go. I think the next time something happened that was like that was a year later. And that already had started meeting with these Sasquatch around the Berry County area. Not necessarily even by my house. I mean, I was just covering a lot of area in the 32,000 acres of state land. I was checking out like acre by acre. Every night and every day I would go out and explore a different thing or a different area and take notes on it. If I found anything that looked like it was a stick structure or something was, living there, I would make note of it. So I was in the woods like literally every day when I first started, and I was trying to find out where they're at. And I was getting a little bit of rocks thrown at me and tree knocks and whatnot, and I knew I was in a good spot. But as the investigations went on, especially the one in Greenville, at the same time I was, doing all this stuff over here in Berry County. In Allegan County, the lady was having the Sasquatch go up on the roof of her house and peek in her windows. And I knew from driving that distance to my house that it wasn't the same group of Sasquatch that I was seeing over here. Like at one time I thought, and then I would see another group of Sasquatch, another 12 miles away over in Middelville State Game Area. And I used to think when I wasn't going out so frequently that these were maybe the same tribes that were just covering a lot of territory. But when I started seeing them in 3 different spots in one day while I was driving around, I knew it wasn't, the same tribe. It was different individual tribes. And they ended up following me home, basically. I was coming down a dirt road near my house, and it was summer, and I was coming up to a stop sign, going really slow with all the windows down. I heard something right next to me break a huge branch as I was coming up to the stop sign. So I was only going like 5 miles an hour. And I kind of knew that the size of the branch meant something really heavy, way more than a deer. So I rolled the truck backwards, and I had this on my my dash cam, but my dash cam was facing forwards, and I was backing up, so you really couldn't see anything. This is before I had a whole bunch of cameras in the truck. And it screamed when I back up. But it sounded like a metal against metal sound, like my truck was making this weird sound when I was backing up, but it wasn't, and that's what showed up on the dash cam. And I started talking to them from the window of my truck in the brush, which is about 20 feet away. And it was dark out. And they didn't make any noise. Then, I used a real dim light, and I didn't see anything over there. I thought they had left, and I hit the area with my spotlight before I left, and I didn't see anything. And I must have blinded them. And then after that, the following day, at dusk, when I walked out of the back of my house and was walking around towards the edge of the property by the swamp, I was getting hissed at. Hissed at by a Sasquatch, very loudly. I mean, you know exactly what it is when you hear it. And I couldn't believe it. And nobody else was around when this was going on. Nobody else was walking by. The neighbors weren't outside or anything. And I wasn't quite sure what it was until it happened the second day, and then the third day I knew exactly what it was because it was so close. 20 feet away in the brush where I was standing next to. I started talking to him then. I had given him food at that point. That was one thing I did. And we met at one spot out in the swamp, and I left the bucket with the bananas and apples in it. And that started a good relationship with him that lasted for years and years, and I would go back there and meet him in that spot all the time. And they were getting closer and closer, and I do have a video of them popping around a tree when they were only about less than 8 feet away from me, because I never used the cameras on them until I got a good night vision camera in 2020. I went back there to test it because they weren't answering me, and I didn't think they were back there, and I accidentally got them these juvenile Sasquatch on video, and I'll put that in a link in the description below. It was a pretty really close, clear. You can see them move around the tree and everything, but I did have a red light on the time because I didn't want to shine them in the eyes anymore, and that's why they don't like bright lights. And I've used red lights ever since, and it's really difficult to pick something out with the red lights, but I have to use it for the sake of their eyes, and I have to use something to be able to see anyway. So I've got that footage, and that started another weird encounter, but that was early off. Like, they were really curious about me, and they had to check me out, but they didn't want to check me out there. Now, before this happened in this meeting spot, and before I made them mad with the lights, I was seeing them around Berry County in the daytime, briefly running between brush when I didn't even know they were there. I was more just kind of like mapping the area in my head, and I didn't even have a camera at all times. That was about to change. Just when I first started, and I immediately knew right away that I had to have a camera on at all times, that there was no chance of ever pulling a camera out of your pocket and turning the thing on and trying to get a picture. You even turn it on to get any kind of video, they'll be gone. It's a brief half a second or 2 seconds of them running in between one pile of brush to another pile of brush at like 20 yards. And your eyes can pick it up no problem, but turning on the machine and getting a picture, that's not going to happen. So even though at the time I didn't get this on video, I was about to learn, and I was going to use the older style GoPros, which were what you're going to see in these videos that I've got listed in the description below and the links. They were old GoPro Hero 5s, but they're the best I could get back in 2017, and I used them for quite a few years before I just recently upgraded to the Hero 10s, which are way better. So I was getting an idea of what was out there, and then I started using the 2-camera bit where I had the one behind me too, and I was picking up more stuff behind me and learning a little bit more of their tricks, a little bit more than I would with just one camera. Anyway, so the spot that I was meeting them in the dark, they decided they wanted to meet me on their own terms, and that spot wasn't good enough. Little did I know that they wanted to pull this. And, they didn't do it again afterwards, but it was a shock to, have this happen. Well, what happened is I went out to the meeting spot, And the little juvenile that I've seen a couple of times that I call Eddie, that I have in one of the links down there, cute little guy about 3.5 feet tall, and then there's another littler one that's blonde. He jumps out in front of me, and then this is like dark enough to where I can see, and I have the red light on. I can see a little bit, and he comes out of the brush and stands right in front of me, and this is all like happening really incredibly fast. I don't even have much of a time to react. I'm just kind of like almost in shock that he did that, because they don't usually, walk right out into the open like that, but it was a decoy, and I didn't know it, and I heard 2 steps behind me, and the second step I started turning around. I didn't even have time to turn all the way around. It was one of the larger ones I didn't even get to see. Grabbed me by my back and my neck and picked me up in the air, passing me out, throwing me over its shoulder, and starts running across the swamp to the other side of the swamp where there's a clearing in the woods. Meanwhile, I wasn't completely passed out. I was on his or her shoulder, and I could hear this Sasquatch really, really having a hard time with my fat ass going across that swamp, breathing really heavy. And I thought it was kind of funny. I knew exactly what they're going to do, because, my encounters with the kid when I was a kid, and I knew I wasn't really in any danger, and I actually said to him, "I'm really heavy, aren't I?"
Okay.
That's the last thing I remember. Somehow I passed out again, and I woke up over on the other side in the swamp very briefly, or in the woods by the swamp. Very briefly, I woke up, and they're all around me, and that's all I remember. And the next thing I knew, I was back at the meeting spot with my clothes on. They didn't seem to take my clothes off this time like they did when I was a kid, but I still don't remember how I got back. I don't remember what happened over there other than briefly waking up. And I really didn't even know what to think about it. It's so weird, because you have these moments of like lost time to where you don't remember anything, and I'm not sure if I even want to remember it. But it was bizarre, and I wasn't shaken up. I kind of expected something like that, but nothing, quite like that, I guess. But at the time, I wasn't even sure if they were ever even going to do that again, or if that was going to continue. If they wanted me to meet them over at this other spot that they took me to, but no, they wanted that time to check me out. And after that, it was really, really smooth sailing with them. I got to spend a lot of time with them in that meeting spot, and I was doing different noises back and forth to them. On different nights, I would do a duck, and one night I would do a cow, and one day I would do a dog or a cat, and they would do the same thing as they did when I was a kid, and do the same call backwards, and do it way better. It was incredible, and this went on. It got better and better for years, about half 8 years, until they started getting too trusting and letting the neighbors see them. And then the neighbors called the DNR, and then it was the black helicopters with the thermal and the drones after that, and that was last year, and haven't seen them since. Not since that day. Not anywhere near this area. Not even close to near this area. I'm sure they're all right, but that was a bizarre encounter, and I don't think any of this stuff will ever happen to any of you, but if it does, know that they're not taking you to go eat you and harm you. And my neck was sore for 6 months. I had a hard time sleeping. It was bad. Them picking me up on my neck really, I don't think they tried to hurt me, but, they did. Now, this last encounter that I want to tell you about, that's pretty much just as weird. Happened in Kentucky, somewhere down in the Cave City area, kind of near Mammoth Cave, about 8 hours away, so it's a long drive for me. But I made this drive year after year after the first time I went down there in 2015 with a bunch of researchers from BFRO and their families. There was about 30 of us, and they introduced me to this area. and it was amazing. I mean, I had nighttime and daytime encounters there, and it's all in that little video that I have in the link in the description below of the Kentucky encounters. And the one in particular was in 2020. The one in 2015 was pretty amazing, but every time we went there, it was pretty amazing. It was very vocal, lots of tree knocks, visuals. I mean, by visuals, it's actual sightings of like, I don't have the camera up in time. We found tracks down there. We had plenty of witnesses down there seeing the same thing. Thermal readings, everything you can imagine, audio. It's a hotbed place. It's Sasquatch that aren't shy. So much so, this is probably the most place I fear of them by far, because there's caves, and generally when they take you to check you out, if they want to do that, and this time they didn't take me anywhere, I was always afraid that they'd take me in a cave and I wouldn't be able to get out. That was my biggest fear with them. Really, they don't have any ill intentions of eating you like people really think. They're not monsters. They just, they want to be safe, and that's what they think is safe. Taking you somewhere, or controlling the whole situation to, well, here, let me tell you. Well, the situation this time in 2020, when we went down there at our usual time in October, or thereabouts, within a few days, we had found tracks the year before down there when we went, and the year before that we had another encounter, and it went on for 5 years. This was 2020 when this weird encounter happened, and that time of year we don't have a much of a problem in the rustic campground that's nearby there to stay there without having anybody else in the campground. But for some reason it was a little bit warmer that year, and we got there and a bunch of Boy Scouts had reserved the whole campground, and we didn't know it. We'd already set up camp, and we had to tear down later, almost when it was dark, when they started moving in, and they needed the space. So we left, and we didn't have anywhere to set up. We went by an old church with a cemetery in the back of it, and in the woods. We decided to set up camp back there, and we had to put the truck in the back of the church and set the tents up right butted up next to the truck, because there was no room for anything else, and there was brush and trees around it. And we were just going to, sleep for a few hours and go. I wasn't expecting anything to come that close to the building, the truck, and the tents all being that close together, even though we're 10, 15 feet from the actual cemetery, which was kind of creepy, but, I don't really have any problems with that. Some people do, I don't. So by the time we'd set up and got in the tents, we were already tired because we were hiking all day. So I think Dango again fell asleep really fast. And I wanted to stay up in here if I could hear anything at all. We haven't heard anything because, there were so many people in the campground about a mile away making so much noise. We figured we wouldn't hear anything at all. And I didn't even hear coyotes. And I was about ready to fall asleep again, and I started hearing the snorting. I don't know if you ever heard a Sasquatch snort. It doesn't quite sound like a deer snort. And you definitely know it's not a deer snort when it gets 20 feet away from your tent. You can hear the footfalls that sound like well over 500-600 pounds. And the amount of lung capacity of these snorts, it was getting closer and closer to the tent, either smelling or snorting out the, like a bad scent like a deer does, blowing out like that, but it's so much louder than a deer. I knew exactly what it was, but I didn't expect it to get closer and closer. I started freaking out. I wasn't screaming or anything, but I did try to wake Dango up again, and that didn't really help. I was even yelling his name a couple times, And that didn't even slow down the snorting and this thing approaching more. And I had my gun with me. I got a license to carry, and I had it on my chest. I was getting that freaked out to where this thing was like right up next to the tent, and it sounded massive. I mean, like, it's just hard to explain how you can feel that sound of the foot hitting the ground, and you know how much it weighs, and it's 2 feet, and it's snorting is louder than anything that I could ever make, or any deer or any animal that I know of in the woods. I knew exactly what it was, and we actually, if you watch that video of us going to this this area in the night, we do get a little bit of a footage of the face and the nose of this Sasquatch. You can see the size of it. But the thing is, when we took the footage, we saw the eye shine, and we mistaked it for fireflies, because it was green eye shine with a red light, and I couldn't figure that on it. Put it together, and I didn't really notice it on the footage until I got back. So we went, to set up this camp, and we went in these tents thinking there was nothing in the area because all these Boy Scouts were making so much noise a mile away, and that wasn't the case. Dango had fell asleep, and I was getting something approaching my tent, and I was about ready to freak out. But before I could do anything, and I was that excited, I suddenly woke up in the morning, and I don't remember anything at all. And I don't know how I could have fell asleep. I don't remember getting tired. I don't remember that thing going away. I don't remember anything. And I know that doesn't really, sound like a really bizarre thing. Yeah, maybe I just fell asleep, but I don't think there's any way I could have fell asleep when I was that scared. All I know is it got that close to my tent, and I called the Dango a bunch of times. He didn't answer, and the thing advanced more, and it sounded like it was right on top of my tent, and the next thing I knew, it was morning. And I had my gun out on my chest inside the tent. And I just found that to be really, really bizarre. I haven't been back there since, but it didn't have anything to do with that encounter. That doesn't shake me up that much. I know they're not out to, they don't physically try to hurt you. I mean, I woke up the next day. Each one I've woke up the next day. I didn't get eaten. I'm still alive. This is just something they do, I guess, if they want you to be in their inner circle. If they're going to let you get close to them, they're going to want to check you out. I don't know if you're able to have this problem, but maybe I shouldn't have told anybody. I kept it myself for all these years because it sounds so bizarre, and I don't want people to get scared to think this is going to happen to them. Because generally, like Evart and the Middleville State Game Area, those tribes of Sasquatch have never done that to me because they've known me since I was a kid. I just don't know what to say. I had to have something to fill this video. I decided to tell you the most shocking things that happened to me since I remember my childhood encounters, and I decided to go out and research this full time. There's a lot more encounters that I've had that I haven't told anybody about, but they don't compare to these at all. They're just mostly, vocalizations that are incredibly close, 5-10 feet away, whether on the other side of the brush. And for a while, like I told you, for 8 years, it was every night during the summer almost, except for like 4th of July or, really busy weekends where there was a lot of noise in the woods. Sometimes it would drive them further away and I had to go to a different spot. But I hope to continue this. I hope maybe I can see them again this following summer at some spot around here. If not, I got to go to all these other spots, like Evart. Hey, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. It helps the channel. Appreciate it.